broadcasting recording. This link isn't shared, but it'll be recorded and put online. People can kind of plan to do this with most of these, just so that there's in case there's any useful stuff to learn for the community. But otherwise, I think Joel here is going to kind of moderate, and that's kind of sounds over formal, but really just wanted to do some introductions, say hi to everybody, and then just kind of do some Q&A and just see what happens. And the call probably won't go longer than 20 minutes. I'll put a thing on here so that I remember to try and wrap things up, or remind Joel to wrap things up. So Joel, do you want to kick off intros?
Yeah. So starting things off, friend of Jeff's from a while back. We helped run put together an event called Super Happy Dev House, which was kind of like a hacker party. And we've talked a lot about, through that event and stuff we've been talking about, one of the many ideas that we discussed was this idea of, using the internet, and specifically like HTTP, as sort of the pipe that connects command line commands together. And so I think Command IO is the realization of a lot of those talks that we've had, and it's been cool seeing other people have come across similar stuff. Coder Salvation, your actual name does it show up here? Leon.
Leon, yeah.
Yeah, cool. It was neat seeing you come in, and so much of the stuff that you were talking about in the chat room was stuff that we talked about too, and it's kind of weird and cool that that type of, those ideas are kind of just in the air, it seems like. But
likewise.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that, that's me. I've been talking with Jeff about this a lot, interested in the community aspect of Glider Labs. But I think, Leon, it's a good kind of handoff for you, kind of introduce yourself here, what you've been doing. You've been doing quite a bit. So let's hear more about that.
So yeah, good one, thanks. So my name is Leon. I live in the beautiful Budapest in Hungary, and I run a small company where I do Node.js consultancy and a bit of prototyping. I also love programming, and yeah, I kind of walked in by accident into Glider Labs, and yeah, it was great to see the same love for command line stuff and thinking about the web and where it could possibly go. So yeah, that's a bit my story, and I'm curious to hear more about Command.io and all its use cases and all the experiments which are going to happen, I guess.
Cool. So we've got a couple other people in here. I don't have all the mappings of names to handles in Glider Labs, but I guess just picking one at random, like Michael, are you able to talk and give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, so been following Jeff's work for a little while. I've worked as a consultant and saw him talking about Command IO, and I think he had tweeted out just the link to the requesting access in the Slack, and I thought, all right, you know what, I'll take a little bit closer look at this. Don't have access yet. I'm not sure I'd have the time to really dig into it too much, but watching intently, because one of my primary desires and kind of concerns is accessibility to everyone. And I think especially new people, a lot of these really powerful command line tools, they might not know, how do I get this and install it? Even saying, hey, brew install this thing, that doesn't always work. What if that fails, right? How do we? So it's especially seeing the early screencasts and hey, pipe this into JQ, and Command IO kind of takes care of all this stuff. Like, that is exactly how you relieve a lot of this burden, at least early on, right? Once they decide to start programming from an airplane or something, that's obviously not going to work. But at least to get people started and get people taught. I think it's a really great way to kind of show people what these tools are like and how to use them without that wall of configuration burden right at the beginning before they've even gotten started. So.
Cool. What's your handle on the Slack?
Probably Scoon or Schoonology.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Cool. And Nate. I can't hear you. I don't know if maybe it's not the muting. Can you check your audio settings?
Hey, Matt, do you want to kind of go while Nate's kind of figuring this out? And if not, like, well, you can motion just to say like pass on your.
Yeah.
Was that a pass?
Sure. Yeah.
Thumbs up pass.
I think we're interpreting that as a pass.
Okay. I'm Matt. I do guess a lot of work on Command and a bunch of other tools from Glider Labs. Been working with Jeff since what, 2015 or 14?
Probably 15. I mean, it's been a couple years.
Yeah. So working on tools like Registrator, Logspout, some of the other client work that we've done. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, that's it for me.
Yeah, Matt's in Austin here. He's actually in the same, he's actually downstairs right now. And Joel's in San Francisco. So, and then I'm Jeff.
Okay.
And yeah, so I guess that's it. What next, Joel? What next?
Yeah, so I'm chatting with Nate, seeing if we can figure out his audio stuff. Oh, and I was going to say, Nate, just chime in if you can figure it out. Just interrupt us, but because I do want to hear what you're doing. But one of the things that
So maybe you can just read his lips.
I can't do that yet. So a thing that was interesting, I wanted to dig into more, Michael, because Leon also brought this up, was this sort of like accessibility step thing, which initially I was like, oh man, are you talking about like screen readers? And but no, you were just talking about like getting quick access to tools and not having to go through the whole song and dance of installing software. And I was just curious, like, where you've run into that, because I think, Leon, you were talking about getting clients access to stuff like SQL consoles and stuff like that. So just was interested in hearing more from you, Michael, about like where you've run into those issues.
Sure. Yeah. Was it me, right?
I think it was both of you, but I think he was specifically asking Michael.
Yeah, Michael, because
Okay.
Leon, yeah, we talked about that a lot, but Michael, I'd want to dig into that a little bit more, and then Leon, chime in as necessary, because I think you two are particularly interested in this aspect.
I mean, I can give an example from my own work this morning. Was looking for a provider for a particular type of API, and thought, oh, it'd be really great to have kind of a disposable VM version of this, or at least some local version of this. Right? I guess I hadn't done the VM first. And one of the ones I found was Java Spring based, and I don't have any of that stuff set up on this machine. I don't do a lot of Java work, and so, right, so I'm immediately up against this wall of, well, I could set up the JDK and do all this work on my machine, or I can look online and sure enough found a Docker container that had been configured for this particular API and downloaded that Docker container and ran that on my machine. And now I have all of the things that I needed, but I didn't have to set any of that stuff up. Someone else had configured all of this, and I could run it on my machine, and I could poke at it and do my tests and all of that, but I don't have to set up Java. Postgres would be another example. If someone wanted to install Postgres, they could learn Rails, right? Maybe they're already a Rubyist, maybe not. doesn't really matter. Rather than trying to figure out how to install it or to grab one of the off-the-shelf solutions and hope it works, again, you can grab the Docker container and run it on your machine and bind the ports. Now, granted, this is a very webby example, but I think that experience translates pretty easily to a lot of CLI tools and things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think those use cases come in super handy. I think one of the things we've been talking about is like are there like specific tools that you've wanted to share or things? Because like that Docker stuff makes a lot of sense, right? But I'm thinking like, how are you going to get a database to work in Command IO? But are there like, LaTeX was one of those things. I could see, like you were saying, that there's certain Java tools that, would be a pain to get set up or to live in this command line environment. But were there specific examples you had, or just generally it's the idea that you're excited about?
Generally the idea, though I can pretty easily come up with other situations. Here's another one, onboarding. So we've got a bunch of custom tools. I've written some command line tools to work on our custom formatting or to do our custom build scripts or whatever. And rather than you having to totally reconfigure your machine in order to work with us, especially something like open source where it's a kind of easy in, easy out team dynamic, right? It's not like quite like at-will employment or something where it's a little bit, we're going to be here for a little while, so it's worth reconfiguring my machine. Right. But if I just want to help out on your open source project and I want to get onboarded quickly to do this thing, if you've written some custom tooling to help in that build process, hey, it'd be really great if we had this common standard for these CLI tools where I could just use that CLI tool that you wrote without having to completely reconfigure my machine first.
Yeah, cool. All right, Nate, should we try again?
Does it work now?
Yes, it does. Hooray!
Yeah.
I also had to reboot to get things working on my computer, so
Good. Well,
we're 2 for 2. So yeah, Nate, we were just, while you were rebooting, we were kind of talking about the kind of use cases of like being able to use something like Command IO to avoid, the pain of getting software installed and set up and sharing tools with other teammates. But yeah, tell us more about kind of your background and your interest in Command IO.
so I live in Los Angeles. I'm joining from the West Coast, and I've been doing DevOps a lot over my career. Mostly Python, AWS by day, Golang by night, kind of for now. And been following Jeff for quite a while. And so when I saw Command IO and how it might fit in with the DevOps requirements and everything, just meshed really well with what I need. I often go onto random servers and need to debug things or whatever, and so to have something you can just reach for like JQ or any of the number of tools is just and I like the ability to bundle all your like the environment and secrets and stuff with a command. Because on my team at work, there's 11 of us, and we do a lot of management of AWS, and so being able to make deployments simpler by making them just an SSH away, especially for when new people join the team or when people haven't done a deploy for a while, just to basically say, instead of install these 8 things on your computer, it's just run this command.
So having done DevOps myself, I totally get that use case of like, the reason I know how to use VI is because I don't want to install Emacs on remote machines, right, to edit a config file. But I wonder, like, there's situations where you're on a server and you're like, I want JQ. Do you see it being an issue that you're SSHing out to a remote host to run these commands, or do you think that'd be okay if you're like, I'm just going to drop Command IO in here so I have my whole toolkit?
Well, I one of the reasons why I'm very keen on Go is the whole deployment is a static binary, and so I actually have a little system I've been working on for a little while to make it easy to download the binaries.
Mhm.
You know, I basically found a bunch of tools that are statically linked. JQ is like one of the few that's not Go, but all the rest of them are.
Yeah.
It kind of dovetails into the whole like Docker image as command
Sure.
that some people use. That I've used that too. So being able to just reach for something is incredibly powerful. An SSH connection for things I think is fine.
Okay.
Most of the systems that I log into are they're ones that we've spun up for customers. So it's not really a random machine. It's a managed instance.
Okay.
So yeah, not usually a problem to SSH out.
Okay. Yeah. No, like you'll notice you've probably seen Andy in the Glider Labs channel, but one of the things he does on his machines is like he'll set up firewall rules so that outbound connections from his machines have to be whitelisted. So like he has like these crazy lockdown systems. So I'm always wondering like what tolerances people have for connections from systems. But cool. It looks like we've got another person just joined in. Help me pronounce your name.
Yeah, it's pronounced like Lajos.
Lajos.
Lajos, yes.
Lajos. Cool. Well, yes, I've seen you chatting in the channel as well. We've been just going around doing introductions. So yeah, tell us more about yourself. What keeps you busy, and then also your interest in Command.io.
Okay, how much time I have?
I think we're trying to wrap up in about 5 minutes, right, Jeff?
5 minutes.
Well, I guess we didn't get too much of a chance to really get into kind of open questions. So I'm willing to go longer if other people are willing to stick around. But I mean, just trying to give a quick intro, and then we can get into more discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So we started a small Hungarian startup company back in 2014 called Sequence IQ, and we had the terrible idea that we should run the whole Hadoop ecosystem in Docker containers, which everybody wanted to tell us that it's a terrible idea, don't do that. Especially it was like Docker 0.7 or something like that. But for some reason, we were convinced that it should just work. So we went for it. And yeah, it did work out. So now Hortonworks did buy us. So now we are Hortonworks. But basically we are doing the same stuff. So the project called Cloudbreak, which is, of course, so we started a long time ago, and we solved a lot of problems we run into, which were like, DevOps type problems. And as a strange thing, we were always running into projects which were written by Jeff and always just helped what we were just exactly doing. And other guys were the HashiCorp guys. So it was just like tools popping up exactly filling the need we had. So just, probably I cannot be short, but just tell me to stop. But yeah, so we started like just duct taping together Surf and DNS mask to get something service discovery like, and then later Consul came into the picture, and then we started to use Consul, and then we saw, oh, there's a registrator, oh, let's put it also together. So we're always solving the same problem, service discovery, which is a big problem in the Hadoop ecosystem, with the tool set which is always available. So yeah, basically that's the background.
You are one of the we were doing a lot of tools during that kind of consulting phase that we weren't even telling people about, that we were using for our clients, and then you would find the repository and start using them.
Yeah, I was spying on you.
Turns out to be really helpful though, actually. So thanks. And then we met when I went to the Craft conference in Budapest.
Oh man, I really want to make it to Budapest one of these days.
You should.
Yeah, I know. Well, cool. Well, Yeah, so I guess open questions. Was there any particular kind of thing you were looking for, Jeff, in terms of feedback or?
No, I mean, that's kind of something I kind of want to do these somewhat regularly, so we kind of don't have to answer every question here. And plus, you can always ask questions, and
Yeah.
you know, this is kind of nice to actually. It's a lot easier to explain things sometimes in person, kind of put face to people, but it also kind of creates a forcing function to actually talk about certain things like the context and like what you're looking for. And one of the things that I noticed in some of the use cases that were mentioned actually reminds me more of a project that wasn't really finished, but is a project called Envy. And the point of that was, and you can go look on the Glider Labs Vimeo channel or somewhere. I'm not sure where all it's posted, but there's a demo on Vimeo. And Envy was a interesting project which actually was focused on creating and managing development environments, all in Docker. So you would SSH in, and then you're in a Docker container, and then that Docker container is a development environment, and you could install whatever you want. But you wouldn't install it there. You'd actually edit the Docker file that defines it, which is accessible within that environment. So if you were to edit that Docker file and then type reload, you would basically reload the environment with those tools installed. But then you could easily create another environment that has another set of tools installed, defined by another Docker container. And so it was just kind of playing with this idea of like development environments using Docker defined by Docker files in that environment. And you would access it all over SSH. And so it was kind of, is a very different model than Command IO, because it was actually like, you know, a shell, and it, you know, actually like persistent, you SSH in, you kind of live in this development environment. And I wasn't sure where to go. There's a lot of interesting stuff there, but Command IO is definitely a simpler version of that. You know, it's not as suited to solving that problem of, give me the right, like I thought it was really cool. Envy could at some point provide like, especially if it was hosted or whatever and has like a web-based thing, being able to, an open source project being able to say, here, use this Envy environment, it has everything you need to do your first contribution to the project, you know? So you don't have to install anything. You know, I thought was a cool idea that could be explored, but so that's definitely like the development environment thing is a really big use case. And you can kind of break that down into like tools, like this is the tool that we use to release, right? That's something that you can put on Command IO. But definitely Command IO doesn't quite fully solve that problem, but it definitely helps. But I just wanted to point that out as there's a video, and some of those ideas might come back around. Anyway, yeah, I feel like we're up to 20 minutes, so we can kind of just like, you know, if anybody has anything to say or ask or talk about, we can kind of just.
Well, I would like to ask a question about this Envy. I think I saw a video on that, and I was really impressed by this profile switching. And is this something you're for Command.io or?
I feel like they're very different tools because by definition, development environment is stateful and has all these properties that are a little bit harder to deal with. And there's definitely a lot of problems in terms of making sure, like it's more important that your local files are in that environment. And so dealing with that is a hard problem. You know, I have a lot of ideas around that, but it's just generally a harder problem, and Command IO is specifically designed to be a much simpler problem and to avoid a lot of those. And so the way we build stuff is very much kind of focused single component things. And so if we ever come back to that, it would probably be separate from Command IO, but you know, potential to integrate with it and stuff like that. Command IO is just the beginning of a lot of projects that we hope to ramp up. Once we have all the infrastructure done for one project, we can just rubber stamp it for another one. That's why this is kind of taking a little bit longer.
Okay.
I mean, I speaking for myself, I kind of like that Command IO is a little bit closer to the Unix philosophy of like being composable, because NV is cool, but then at least when I see those situations or those setups, you always end up kind of in one corner, whereas I like that Command IO is very much mapped to the command concept, and I think you're going to see a lot of neat use cases come out of that, just because it's, you know, it's not very constrained.
Yeah, there's a lot of different use cases, but it still helps. Like I said, there's a lot of tools that you can make that are part of your development process that will still make it easier to do. You know, like I said, one of them is releasing, you know, cutting releases or deploying and stuff like that. You can make all of those Command IO command.
Yeah.
So any other?
Is there anything that, you know, we as the spectators, so to speak, can do to help help you and whoever else is working on the actual stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a really good question. You know, part of the point of starting this kind of community-oriented thing, I mean, it's very intentional that in order to kind of request access, you have to join our Slack, because it's really important for the project to develop a community around it, because it's going to be, you know, like I've mentioned that it's going to be open source, but it's kind of going to be open source in a much bigger way than most open source. The service itself will be open source, and the running of the service will be open source. And so there will be plenty of opportunity to help, even if it is getting other people to join the community and tell people about Command IO. Basically, the entire process. If you were to think of Command IO as a startup, which I'm sure some people looking in might think that that's kind of what's going on. That's very much not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is create almost like an anti-startup. It's a service that runs and has a lot of this, you know, basically everything it needs to self-sustain. So it's open source. All the tooling and automation that is involved in running it is open source. Those processes are open source, and, you know, contributors can participate and help out and try and create as much transparency and visibility and automation to make it easy for people to help basically keep the thing alive. And that includes also marketing and stuff as well. So, you know, we'll kind of build in marketing metrics and stuff like that, and just tell people, you know, hey, you know, talk about Command IO, and then actually point them to a graph that actually shows, like, so they can kind of see the impact of their contributions from a marketing standpoint. And then, and because it is a paid service, that's kind of an interesting model as well that I haven't really talked about. But the idea is that I don't know if it's too complicated to kind of get into now, but the idea is that any of the money that comes into Command IO is basically put into a special account, which is why we made custom accounting software for Glider Labs, so we can automate all of this accounting. The money comes in, and then it first goes to pay off the expenses, so AWS, stuff like that. So it's basically hard cost of running it. And then the rest will go into a buffer, and this buffer is defined by the community. It'll be, you know, maybe defined by code or whatever. And then that provides the community runway. So if for some reason the service gets in a point where it's not making enough money and it's burning more money than it's making, that there's some time for the community to kind of do something to turn that around. And if there's any money that's created once that buffer is full, that's distributed among what we're calling stakeholders. It's just evenly split, a group of people that are basically stakeholders. And at this point, that group consists of me and Matt, but basically, based on contributions and involvement and stuff like that, other people can be added to that group and literally get we'll call them royalties, not dividends, but royalties of sort of excess from that. And so that's sort of how we are planning to run Command IO and have Command IO validate that model, and then we're going to take that and replicate it for a bunch of other projects. So we'll see how that part goes.
Cool. Very cool.
So I guess, I don't want to keep people for much longer because we're definitely past 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to wrap up. But yeah, let's keep these things regular so that we can, be checking in periodically and talk about, like, next topic I want to talk about is like building your first command.io command, because I know that that Leon's done that, and I want to do that on the project I'm working on. So maybe next chat that can be one topic, or we'll maybe actually in the Slack, let's figure out what we want our next topic to be. So cool.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody.
Sure.
Cool. Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.